Welcome back after a wacky weekend of tons of different esports happening across the world. We're trading dragons for Nexus when it comes to League of Legends. Counterstrike was going absolutely buck wild crazy all the way across the pond. You'd be surprised if you miss anything throughout the weekend. I would not shun you because there was way too much in my humbled opinion. Counterstrike Major was kicking off. We got backstabs coming through all over the place. Makati having a good time. Simple's back in peak form. And then, of course, it would not be the weekend in the conversation without a little bit of VCT. Masters Toronto is well and truly off and underway. We already have teams being eliminated. The playoff bracket. We got main character aura up on so many different main stage. All of that plus some more. Welcome to another installment of Today in Esports on a beautiful Monday in June. My name is Andy. Joined with me as always is Chris. And honestly, man, I don't know how you were able to contain yourself through the weekend. We were sitting here going to war watching so many esports.
We were. I mean, League of Legends, I was trying to watch Counterstrike at the same time. And of course, you had to have the third monitor with Valorant. But we also had many more, like CEO was going on also.
Correct. Yeah, tons of fighting games happening, and honestly, between all of 8 of those games, I was trying to go cross-eyed with how many different screens I could keep on my monitor at the same time. Big FGC fan over here. But we're going to be starting off today's conversation with Counter-Strike, and if you've been living under a rock and you've been missing some of Blast's Open and all of that Austin Major has been kind of hilarious. If you're looking at it from one perspective, that, of course, would be the Falcons. Falcons, if you're unaware, by the way, went through a crazy buyout to accrue one of player named m0NESY from G2. Now, Falcons, they have, over the handful of different months, have always been on the Cinderella story to try to be a top 2 team. They've been beating MOUZ. They've been taking Vitality to the brink. They're ending streaks within their own right. And we truly felt like that this was about to be the real deal. They get in towards stage 2, and then they get eliminated.
Well, that's to say the least. Let's take a look at the bracket. So they win against Bait, but then they go up against Envision. Sorry, actually they lose against Bait, then they go against Envision. They're going to lose there as well. That puts them 0-2. You lose 3, you're out of there.
Correct.
Into OG. They do win 1. Then they win 2. Okay, so they're moving on. We're seeing a little bit more of what we saw from Falcons and what we're expecting. Then they face MIBR and just completely drop the ball. They're going to go into MIBR. They're going to end up losing. They would win map 1 on Ancient 13-6, looking a little bit better like them. But then they go to Nuke, one of their favorite maps, end up losing 13-9. And then map 3 would go to the Decider, Inferno. And once again, they would just drop the ball. And this is exactly as you said. Falcons put a lot of money into m0NESY, but you would expect them, especially after going into one of their last matches. They go into Vitality, actually almost take them the distance, then end up dropping the ball in not even playoffs, group stages.
Yeah, just within the group stage. Again, I think that there's some monicum to talk about, like some asterisks, of course. Best of ones are a very difficult thing, right? But getting in towards these qualification matches, losing one map to OG, maybe it's not as rehearsed and whatever it may be, just losing to MIBR in general, just off a namesake for Falcons who not even within a calendar month ago were in a grand finals versus Vitality going all the way to a map 5, darn near double, triple overtime and a handful of those as well. MIBR are right to pop off. And I think that if you're a fan of Falcons, you're not overly concerned. It is an unfortunate mishap that does happen, but Nico, again, top rifler in the entirety of the Counter-Strike community, he's already taken to X and a handful of other social media platforms just to ensure, alongside of their coaching staff as well, that everything's going to be A-okay.
Yes, and we'll have to see how they bounce back, though, because it is a big loss. If you were watching any of the matches, you could see the visible frustration on all the members. Nico just sighing, m0NESY just looking down. So we'll have to see how they bounce back. Of course, it's not the end of the world. It is only one major, but it is one that they would probably want to get back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that 3v5 and that loss in the retake on that B-bomb site to MIBR is going to be legendary until we rectify that in a few moments' time. But it's not the only one that's making headlines throughout the entirety of the Austin Major. Vitality's a very impressive streak did come to an abrupt ending in their opening best-of-1 match. Going back in towards stage 3, they had to end up going up against Legacy, who, well, for the namesake, have been putting on a little bit of a run ever since stage 1. Us here at the office, we were ready to write off Legacy getting 0-3 back in stage 1. They make the gauntlet run all the way to face World's #1 in a best-of-1 on June 12th, and they won.
They did indeed, and, well, it was exciting to say the least, and As a Vitality fan, you probably wouldn't be too concerned about it. They would end up going on a run, but Legacy's run, though, they looked pretty good, but they would end up eventually falling. So as you see there, Virtus Pro did knock them down a bit. They would try to get back into their winning ways. Unfortunately, just wouldn't be enough at the end. They did get the win versus Linvision, but when it came down to that last match versus Mouse, they would end up falling 2-1. And unfortunately, their Legacy, as of right now, did fall to an end, but the Cinderella story, I hope we can see more of them because they did look very good. Remember, this was the team that wasn't even supposed to be here. They got in off of a technicality. They came in off of Bestia not being able to get their visas, and then they made a Legacy run.
Yeah.
Held to their name. They were a lot of fun to watch, so I hope we do get to see more of them going forward.
Yeah, heart-wrenching of a series, right? Best of 3 in between Linvision and Legacy. You want to talk about two teams that have been making a name for themselves just off of very fun interviews and pop-off moments, taking down juggernauts along the way. It would definitely be in between those two teams, so we definitely get to see more of them in the near future, as they will not be a part of the playoff bracket. You saw there at the end being eliminated by Mouse. They're in the final qualification series in those 2-2 series. Very, very difficult thing to go up against Mouse and Vitality within one stage. But taking maps off of Mouse, taking that one best of one off of Vitality and ending the streak, that is history within its own self. So wonderful stuff coming through from Legacy. Again, we hope to be able to see them a little bit more down the line. But if there's one thing that we're definitely scarce on when it comes down to Counterstrike in this current juncture of the Austin Major, it is North American representation. Now, it's pretty obvious at this point that a lot of some of the best Counter-Strike players out there are typically European-born. Shout out Simple. You look at that Faze roster, all European until you get to Elite. She's like the last North American player in the entirety of the tournament. But even Team Liquid, albeit not having all North American players, is considered a North American team because of the circuits that they do play on. It didn't look too good for them. They could not hold the American flag up high, as they also got eliminated.
They cannot, and we're looking at where they're going up against. They did go against Linvision, as you say, did have a really good run as well. But then we'd also see them going up against Mouse. They're up on Mouse here. It is 1-1. They should be able to close this out in the overtime, and they just completely dropped the ball, or in this case, dropped the guns. You see them. And they're going to go ahead and, they have the disadvantage, but they're just getting completely outplayed. They end up throwing this, allowing Mouse to come back, and this, of course, allows Mouse to continue their streak that we would eventually see them run, as we saw in the bracket earlier. But this is just so unfortunate for NA as a whole.
Yeah, no, it really is. I think, but if you want to kind of tip your hat to anything, and this is more of a question mark for around Malice Esports as a whole, but I mean, losing Nuke 13-4 versus Team Liquid is absolutely insane. That is a staple when it comes to Mouse. They were taking that off of Vitality when they were actually playing in their best of 3s and best of 5s. But yeah, Team Liquid obviously not being able to step up to the chopping block and being able to walk away with a 5-star meal. So I think that it's very, very impressive to be able to see them play these top teams close. But it is the fickle mistress of this entirety of a tournament. You only have so much room for error at the end of these best of 1s and best of 3s, especially when Mal's Vitality, they're losing best of 1s, and now they're going into these high and low matches where a lot of people, myself included, when it came down to pick'ems, did not have them at not even just a little bit. So with that being said, Team Liquid, I hope to see them again, much in the same boat when it comes down to Legacy, to be able to see what they're able to produce in a few more tournaments' time. But that's not the only team we got to be talking about. A team that did end up making it all the way through stage 2, 3, and then into the playoff brackets is going to be Faze. They have qualified all the way through. Not 3-0, but that team's looking good right now.
They are, and it's as simple coming back. And this is exactly kind of what we were talking about in the last tournament leading from Dallas to Austin.
Yeah.
Seeing him warm up, and we're finally starting to get to see the simple most Faze clan fans probably want to see. He's coming out, he's getting the shots, he's getting the kills. So we see here taking out 9-10, they're down, but they would end up coming back. And this is kind of the trajectory of what Faze probably wants to see with Simple being added. They did make it to the playoff bracket as well, so now they are going to be moving on. And I think we're starting to see a Faze clan that's rising to our expectations.
In this 2v4 too, Simple and Frozen going up against the double op setup for Mongols should never have happened. Delay smoke to then swing inside of the tunnel the way they did is something of a big brain play you would only expect to happen when it comes down to Simple. He's playing really well off of Frozen and really fitting into that camp quite wonderfully. So here's the entire route when it comes down to Faze, right? You see them right in the middle of that round 3 mid match, having to go up against Legacy in a best of 1. So they end up getting Vitality's trade later on in stage 3. But but they got the best of Mouse in a round 2 low after losing to Aurora of all teams. It honestly, to say anything for the stage 3, I think that you're very happy to see this if you are a FaZe fan. They are playing with a certain amount of grit, and then 2-0ing Mongols the way they did, as effective and decisive for a lot of their decisions as well. Simple's looking pretty in good form. Kerrigan calling them plays as well. Elige, Frozen. You can't ask for a better supporting staff. They could be setting themselves up for a Grand Finals appearance.
They could, but speaking of Grand Finals, with everything we've talked about and past these crazy couple of weeks, we have finally have our playoff bracket for the Austin Blast Major. Let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, first, let's recap stage 3. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm getting excited with all the FaZe talk and everyone moving on, but stage 3, as we said, it was back and forth. There was a lot of upsets. There were a lot of crazy matches. Let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at some of them and how they played out.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody watching at home throughout the entirety of this tournament, ourselves inside this office, are going to be very, very confused, a little bit of upsetty spaghettiness, given the fact that our pick'ems got absolutely obliterated in the first series. Legacy in a best of 1 versus Vitality on Inferno of all maps. You would expect them to do quite well, but this Legacy team, they were definitely playing on that stage for quite some time. They walked away with that one.
And as you talked about Aurora coming up, we will see the back. You're going to get knifed in the back end, but Aurora taking that first map off of FaZe, knocking them down to 0-1 to start it off, and that was a pretty big one that we saw here as well. We see them playing across the pillars, Frozen trying to get it, but 2v1, just not enough. The defuse will come out at the very end here. I believe it's pixel perfect, or just, nope, just not enough. So FaZe will get the win, but unfortunately they will end up falling to Aurora in that match.
Yeah, just very, very close indeed. Again, when it comes down to maps like Anubis, you're mostly seeing like FaZe playing again like these newer age teams, just trying to work on their reps, because when you're going up against like your Maus, your Vitalities, it's going to be those offshoot picks that you're definitely going to want to get the better of them. So Vitality back on screen through the lower matches after losing to Legacy in that opening best of 1, going up against 3D Max, and as these lads started to get a little bit more comfortable there at Austin, they were able to walk away with that one. But a big conversation piece as well. The one team that did make it 3-0, I wouldn't say scot-free, they definitely got scathed along the way, was Team Spirit. The time away, albeit definitely with its certain controversy. I think that Chopper, what he was talking about on stream mostly is that this team is in a really good mental space. They're making really good decisions, and their plays are being showcased just like you're seeing right here. In that final 1v1, versus Wonderful, Donk, 23-17. Why would you want anybody else in that situation? Actually misses the first bullet, but then gets the respray for the kill and then the subsequent map win.
And again, talking about the two of the teams that were probably talked about some of the most going through these stages, Legacy versus Lin Vision, 1-1 here to kind of see who would, take it to the next level. But it would end up coming out. It would be Legacy taking that win over Lin Vision. Coming back though, this is again FaZe plan once again going against the Mongols. They would end up getting this 2-0, which would propel them to that playoff bracket. And we again are seeing Simple just coming out clutch. Zinzu also coming out getting some of the kills, but it just wouldn't be enough to take down FaZe.
Yep, Maus going up against Aurora this time around in a best of 3. Again, if you're unaware, best of 1s were the original matches, but if it was for qualification or elimination, that's when a true best of 3 was going to be coming through. Throughout all this tournament, we're not getting a single best of 5. That's what is very unique. But Wakadia, through the smoke, still gets the head tap somehow. That's some good centering if you ask me. But FaZe back over towards that Mongols matchup. Here's some final few conclusions. Simple with the AWP was certainly getting the job done. You got an AWP matchup, gets the snap on a 9-10. When two oppers have AKs in their hands, it's always down for a wild time. But this was the final match of the entire evening. It was Pain going up against VP. And VP, through the beginning of stage 3, were really turning heads. Pain, we're doing the same, but for the opposite in all the wrong reasons. But this one going the distance the way that it did was fantastic to be able to see. Unfortunate for VP, surely, but still a crazy series.
They are, and also fan favorites, Mongols coming out. Malbs indeed, though, will end some of that, getting the final kill and defuse. But as I said, moving on to playoffs after those crazy 3 stages we are seeing here. Spirit versus Maus, Vitality versus Na'Vi, FaZe versus Mongols, and Furia versus Pain.
Yeah, this one's going to be really interesting, right? I mean, Furia, again, from those last few matches last night, Pain getting the better of VP to even find themselves here. That lower side of the bracket, that is the wild card side, right? Like, FaZe's best chance to make a grand finals since how long? Like, it feels like forever since I've seen Kerrigan in a grand finals. It probably hasn't been that long. I'm just giving him some real raggy tags here, but still, I think Faze versus Mongols is probably your biggest look at for this opening round 1 matchup. I think Vitality should be doing okay versus Na'Vi, and then the Spirit Mouse matchup. I mean, that's grand finals written all over it. Whoever wins that matchup very much so might win the entire tournament. And I know Vitality's on that same side of the bracket, but I'm still looking at that stain that they did have from that losing that one individual best of 1 to Legacy. Maybe they're finally getting comfortable. They are number 1 in the world for a reason. But hey, if you want to jump up on the main stage and shoot as straight as ZywOo, why don't you go ahead and download Aim Labs? It is the #1 aim trainer across the planet. Here's a quick word from them.
Games are about competition, a way to test our skill and prove we are better. Challenge is in our nature. We need to know what we're capable of. How far can we go? It's a question that drives millions of gamers to push themselves and prove that it's only a matter of sheer will. Ever since first-person shooters came into the esports scene, players have never stopped defying the odds through the most important mechanic of them all: aim. Aim is everything. It's a set of skills that needs to be trained, and this is where science and gaming meet in Aim Labs, the aim trainer that redefines what gaming means, because science doesn't leave anything to chance. Winning is never a matter of luck. Every brief moment of greatness takes constant and unrelenting preparation, and that's exactly what Aim Labs is about. We enable players to thrive and upset the balance. Together, we elevate play.
Well, the craziness didn't stop at Counterstrike Masters Toronto. The BCT is going on for Valorant, and let's just say that it also saw a share of craziness where all the #1 seeds from each region decided that they just didn't want to win going into their games. And well, what a quarterfinals it started off to be. And I can't say that all my pick'ems were just completely wrong going into this. Let's take a look at how it's going. G2 starting off versus PaperX. PaperX looking very good going into their matches. G2, one of the heavy favorites, ended up losing.
Yeah, here's one of the craziest things, right? G2 Esports, #1 team out of North America. They had a crazy lower bracket run through that stage to actually beat Sentinels in that grand finals, going up against PaperX. All of the stage 1 champions got to choose their opponents. G2 thought that they were going to have an easy route versus PaperX, but the thing about it is G2 have been sitting on the sidelines watching this new meta develop. PaperX, Wolves, they've been looking really good, adapting to this non-new tail meta that we are currently existing in, mostly all off of the Fade meta that we're getting from Patman, who had a great split here for PRX, going up against Trent, who all of his flexibility has been definitely looked at. Same thing could be said for Jog. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had PRX taking a single map, let alone the entire series. Say nobody, but you know there was one person. He's actually locked inside this room with you, Chris, and it was me, but still, nonetheless, I think you're mostly looking at G2 Esports just trying to figure out what they're supposed to do against all of the extra team compositions, because we went in towards this Lotus, this final map in this series, and this is where things got really, really weird. Jog on the Neon, I wouldn't say that he was scamming, but to see Devi on the Vice composition on the opposite side with something playing the Yoru comparatively to a wild composition on the opposite, I'd like to think that PRX were definitely expecting a mirror matchup here, but G2 were just trying to square peg, round hole the entire situation.
Yes, and well, I can't say. We're looking at G2 trying to figure out what was going on. And as you said, the big one coming out, Trent, we do see him getting some kills here, but he did have to shift. You know, we saw the Tejo that he played those 30 matches on, and a lot of questioning was going in what would happen afterwards. It wasn't that it was a complete blowout. We do see the scores here being PRX winning 13-10 and then 13-11, but at the end of the day, you would expect it to kind of be the opposite end around. Trent, though, does look good on the KDA, 39 and 28, but are we getting enough of the utility coming out of him that really propelled G2 to be that #1 seed for NA as they went on? But let's shift sides. So now we have XLG versus Sentinels, of course, Sentinels being the #2, and XLG choosing them. And here we do have some NA hopium with Sentinels taking this win over XLG. And it looked pretty good for them. They do end up getting the 2-0. They'll go forward on that. And I do believe, as always, the Sentinel buff coming out massive. But Zekin, massive on this map. In this game, sorry, 41 and 20 KD. Of course, we have John QT following up as well. Zealous bringing up the rear, may not have the best, but of course he always brings that energy. As we just see here, the massive 4K by Zekin just blowing them completely out of the water.
Yeah, especially to do it on Sunset, like that is XLG's pick. They were very notable there through their Chinese stage, taking a lot of sunsets, but hockey jersey buff there for Sentinels for sure in Toronto. I think that if there's one team, especially besides Paper X, that we're very happy about the Teo nerf and the change of the meta altogether, it is actually Sentinels. Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, you do have champions on that roster, Masters champions on that roster, so they know what it's going to end up taking. This hit over towards the C site was definitely beautiful, just isolation after isolation. You talked about all of the utility pickup when we were in that previous series. I think the same thing you could be said on the opposite side, especially for all the Sentinels players. Narrate and John QT on the double initiator is a real problem. The Breach, albeit nerfed ever so slightly, Fade coming back into the meta fully in lieu of the Teo nerfs. I think that could potentially be Sentinels at their best. When Narrate and John QT are in the flow state, Zekin can just chow everything and get so many kills.
Yes, and I am really happy about that. We'll have to see how they do because they are going to move forward on it. We'll have to see how they continue 13-13-6. Both of them, they're actually completely dominating both of these maps going into these games versus XLG. There are maybe a little bit of questions around Sentinels as well after making their run through NA and qualifying for Toronto, but they look massive now, and I think they're going to be everyone's #1 seed. Moving on, though, we do have RRQ versus Wolves, the Chinese #3 seed, who played an amazing Swiss stage coming out and then completely blowing RRQ out of the water. The APAC #1 seed. They started first on Ascent, and Wolves just came out banging with the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, no, they really did, right? And if you're looking for like one big thing to be pulling away from these Eastern teams, they love forcing deadlock in a lot of different situations. Deadlock is another agent that we do not see all too often, but on a map like Ascent with all the different corners that you can bounce the Annihilation Deadlock's ultimate off of, you can get away with some pretty silly plays. And Lysor looked very comfortable on the Deadlock. Again, a very flexible Sentinel player has been Lysor throughout all of their Valorant career thus far, but Wolves coming in against RRQ, main character energy like I was talking about in the introduction, man. That team is looking very, very good and quite fierce as well. And not to mention, I mean, RRQ have been underneath a certain magnifying glass ever since winning the APAC region. The way that they did against Gen G, people always were regarding Gen G to be the true APAC #1 team, and it looked like RRQ, I wouldn't say we're underprepared. Here's that little bit of the Annihilation play that I was talking about. Off the bounce from the wall, it's just, you're almost like doing like slight trigonometry, some geometry involved as well, and Lysor was able to do it quite wonderfully. So it was a 1-0 lead for the Wolves going in towards the Icebox, which was actually RRQ's pick. And don't adjust your screen. That was a very real half that we had. It was 6-3 was the scoreboard, but that's what it transitioned to.
Yes, 9 straight rounds after that transition for Wolves.
Yep.
And that's what you're saying. Main character
All on the
energy.
offense.
Yes, and this is after they came a loss in Swiss stage to Sentinels.
Correct.
And just completely 180'd it and turned it around, and now they're looking like one of the strongest teams that we see in this tournament. And as you said, when you bring that energy, especially from Sufat, who's able to get up, pump up their team, and then you have the rest of the team popping this juicy 40-31 KD, 179 ADR, then they're going to be looked at as one of the teams to beat going forward. And as you said, Gen G as well did excellent, maybe should have been the true APAC #1, but you have a #3 seed Chinese team completely destroying a #1 seed. We are in for a massive tournament here, and Wolves are just on a run as a pack. They cannot be stopped.
Sufat he's that main character energy. I mean, he's got a 6-pack. He is a legend. Like, he's undeniable. His flexibility is insane. But for one more thing, just to say it, I really respect what Wolves are trying to do. That Gecko on the Icebox, unconventional. The Deadlock on the Ascent, we have not seen. They're pulling out agent selects that a lot of people are probably not seeing until they actually spawn into the PPA room with them. But Fnatic versus Gen G, this was a real tough one to call. Again, EMEA has been in a really weird spot all year long, and really all tournament long if you think about like Team Liquid as well as Heretics bouncing out the way that they did. So Fnatic is EMEA's last hope, and they look good going up against Gen G. Again, Gen G, like I was talking about, they are regarded to actually be the #1 APAC team. They have been winning more often than not until they actually reached that Grand Finals versus RRQ back at the APAC arena. And Texture was surely showing what Fnatic needed to be worried about.
They did, but we also were talking about this. They didn't actually look bad. They were the only team that were actually able to bring it to a best of 3. They were able to take it to all 3 maps. Yeah. They were able to take one, so it does show that at least, you know, they have one edge on some of the other #1 seeds from across the region. So Crashy's, you know, NA representative over there in EU actually did fairly well. So 48 kills, 41 deaths. I think they have an upward trajectory that they can make when they're going through this match. Of course, we would have to see how they do in a couple of the later matches. But here, Gen G coming out, they would end up losing this. They would Fnatic would get the overtime, force it, and they would. Let's take a look at this real quick though. Going across there, and I am kind of impressed with Fnatic though coming out. I think they look fine, and we'll have to see. But this is massive. Can he get the kill? So much time left.
Look what Ash is playing. Ash has been playing the tail on Split, and like honestly, may not have been doing them any favors. It was definitely an obscure composition to be picked for Gen G, but I mean, Teo in the right hands is still an absolute force. I think that Foxy is another player to be really worried about on Split with the deadlock. Was finding a lot of good eliminations, but Sunset will be the decider. We would end up getting a lot of good moments coming through from Texture continuously. Again, Texture on Neon. It's a very iconic duo to the APAC region. Again, he was the one that was jumping up and screaming. And as I was talking about from the deadlock in the previous series with Wolves, again, Gen G are also leaning into it as well. And Foxy's deadlock, again, is just a real problem. Taking it from the Split, was finding a lot of high impact with it on that map #2, albeit losing it. Gen G kept Foxy on deadlock going into Sunset. Again, deadlock is very good on Sunset with all the different cutoffs that you can do with her walls, but I think it's just one of those things, again, that a lot of the compositions are still being learned on because of our first seeded teams not playing throughout the Swiss stage. They don't really have the reps, and I know it's only like a total of maybe 2 games if you're looking at it from Sentinels because they were the 2-0 team, but like still, it's those reps, it's the understanding of how the meta is actually played. It kind of gives these teams a certain edge.
It does, and as you said, we saw that come through. All the #1 seeds losing. The only one that actually showed any little bit of fight back at that moment was Fnatic. They did do that, but we did move into some of the lower matches. We'll have to see how they fare against each other now. So we had G2 versus XLG, China's #1 seed versus America's #1 seed, and we would finally see some life coming out of G2. And this is what you're talking about, the reps coming in. We're finally starting to see them move towards the team that we were expecting.
The Jogmo's on stage, and I can honestly tell you this is not going to do wonders for my rank MMR. I'm going to be seeing so many different random people thinking that they could just be like Jogmo and trying to play Fortnite and Valorant. He's building walls all around the yellow and just hopping over behind enemy heads and stuff. Look, if you got a mustache like that and you're in my rank games, you are more than welcome to play Sage on Icebox, but do not lock that because it's the driver, it ain't the car, man. And Jogamo definitely went a little AWOL when it comes down to his battle stage. But I will say this much when it comes down to it, seeing all the #1 seeds in the lower bracket is very rare. I don't even think that it's ever happened at a Masters tournament before in Valorant's history. But this is the one thing that you always have to be concerned with when it comes down to G2. It is their absolute disgrace to the flexibility. Again, Jogamo has always been regarded as a Yoru one trick. We saw him actually pick the Gecko on Icebox back in stage 1 when they were playing up against Sentinels. Actually had some pretty good value with it as well. But then the Sage, why not? We could all use a little pocket Sage in our life. G2 were able to take 1-0 lead with a 13-3 win on Icebox.
Yes, and then they would move over to Haven. Of course, they would pick up the win here, but a little bit of fight back from XLG on this one. G2, though, after those 2 opening rounds, would come back smacking with like whopping 6 rounds in a row to help them push forward. But as you said, we do see the flexibility coming out, so we do have the Euro, though, coming back onto this map, so we are going to see more of that little standardized play style from Jogamo, and it would, of course, help them in the win. He would end up going 18-16 on the Euro. Leaf doing such a great job, going 20-12. So we do see a little bit more of this G2 that we're expecting, but they still have a lot, of room to go. They have to move through these brackets, and do you think we'll see a little bit more flexibility coming out of them or a rise in their next couple matches?
Nah, they're done playing games, man. The only game they're playing right now is a proper agent selection at this point, because getting Leaf back on the Vice, seeing the KJ as well. We got the Yoru. The only thing that was crazy in that entire series was Jagamo picking stage, but he can do whatever he wants, apparently. So all good stuff there at the end. A couple other number 1 seeds from APAC and EMEA facing each other in the lower round 1 elimination match. Fnatic versus RRQ. Again, RRQ not going to be feeling very happy with how their tournament had concluded after being the number 1 seeded team. Going in towards Lotus, this was Fnatic's pick. And candidly speaking, when it comes down to Fnatic on this map mode combination, it is one player in particular. He is not a part of the European nation. Chris already said it. His name is Crashies, and Crashies on the Fade is a real problem, even throughout all of the different trials and all the different clutches that RRQ were able to put together. You saw right there from Crazy Guy. It just mostly did not matter. The lead was insurmountable on the first half. Just so many defensive rounds, so many retakes and defuses coming through. Fnatic were reading RRQ like a book.
9-3 curse wouldn't do anything to Fnatic this game. They would get it, run with it as they move on. 13-5 would be the ending score on that Lotus pick. And as you said, it was Fnatic's pick, so they came out strong on it. Both are coming out. But again, as Fnatic like to be, they like to give us a show, so they like to take us to all the matches. RRQ finally putting a fight back, coming on to Haven to pick up their first actually map win of this tournament, which is insane to say when you think about it.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, but this was a staple, I would say, for RRQ. And if there's one person that absolutely stepped up within this series, it would end up being Money T and Jemkin, right? Your two duelists really trying to brute force their way throughout all of this. I think that Zafiro also played a very crucial role within this Haven. We know how annoying a Cypher can truly be, but I think that it's one of those things that RRQ were definitely at their peak when it came down to Haven. Again, as the first map within the game, I almost feel like you got to have it at that point, but they would force that map 3, and it would go towards Ascent as the decider. And as far as compositions are concerned, very, very similar. The biggest difference on the two sides would be Crazy Guy on that KO. KO, a very good initiator when it comes down to Ascent. You get a lot of good information. Is playing a double initiator with Cushy on that Sova, but compared to the opposite side, you have the Cypher, but it's the Vice out of Chronicle that was just constantly funneling so many of these players out of RRQ in very unfortunate positions. It was a dominating map 3 win for Fnatic to send RRQ's APAC number 1 seed packing home.
And it's decided, as you said, we do have Fnatic starting with that. They would end up going 9 kills. So again, this is 9 rounds for him. And once they get that lead, they're showing that they're able to take it in the end. Of course, maybe on side swap, you get those 2 for the side of RRQ, but it's just not enough. 4 rounds in a row right after for Fnatic to close it out. And as we're looking at the stats, just no one on RRQ able to get the kills into the positive range. And when you're not getting kills, when you're not getting the shots or slaying out, you're going to lose these matches. And Fnatic just look a lot better. As we were talking about, Crashy's not even topping the score on Ascent. He's sitting at 3rd with only +2, which means that everyone can stuff up for Fnatic when needed.
Kayak really showed out for Fnatic as well. Flexibility in between the Raze and the Yoru. Off-Air, definitely the most flexible as far as all 3 maps are concerned. Went from Sage to ISO to Chambered. You saw it right there. It doesn't really matter if you're hitting flicks like that. So here's the current bracket in its state. Paper X, we're going up against Sentinels today. That, at this time of recording, is actually happening. It's going down right now. And then Wolves going up against Gen G. This is going to be a very, very tough matchup for Wolves going up against Gen G, who are very battle-hardened, but you still got Lumen down in the lower bracket. I don't remember if Valorant actually does a reverse or if everybody just drops from top to bottom, but G2 Esports, world's number 1, runner-up at Masters Bangkok, losing to T1, are in that lower bracket. Fnatic also just waiting to see who their opponent is going to be. It's truly, and I do believe this, anybody's tournament to win.
It is, and when you're looking at that, even in the lower bracket, you have those number 1 seeds. They're probably scared of who they're going to play with how well everyone else has been doing so far.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, well, again, Valorant is still going on, so you want to make sure that you tune into all of our different shows on Queued Up. We go over pick'ems, and we kind of attack each other on all of our different guesses, but also at the same time, we're constantly giving you updates on the channel, so you want to make sure that you subscribe. Get into the comment section. Let us know who is going to take the entire tournament and why it is going to be Wolves. But that's all we got as far as the Valorant is concerned. We're going to shift our focus over to Call of Duty ever so slightly. Just as a quick reminder for you guys, Champs is happening. It is going down next week. We're about to be packing our bags to Kitchener, Ontario, and it should be a very fun time. The top 8 teams throughout the entirety of the season have actually found themselves at the end of the road for a double elimination last hurrah bracket. Thieves going up against Breach, seen it so many times. Surge, Heretics, I'm not gonna lie, take my Vamos. The Spanish team looking very good. We got El Clasico in a round 1 match between Faze and Optic, and then Ultra gonna be going up against the Ravens. And throughout all of this time that we've been spending in between Major 4 and now, it's almost about a whole calendar month in between the event, there has been some difference and changes to the game. We do have a couple of different updates as well, but it's mostly coming down to that practice. Whatever it looks like behind the scenes, who's going to be able to be the best team once we do get to Kitchener in Ontario in just about a week's time. But with all of that, I think that it's going to be very impressive to be able to see who's going to be able to come out on top of that. A lot of people are all eyeballing Faze, to potentially take this and then go into the sunset of EWC to be able to win that one as well. But also having Challengers Finals throughout the entirety of the weekend too. You want to make sure that your butts will be seated because the top 3 from there, they also end up going straight to EWC, but throughout all intents and purposes, you want to make sure that you are seated. That championship weekend, again, is starting next week, and the top 8 teams are going to be fighting for the piece of that pie. Another news that was happening throughout the entirety of the weekend, CEO, one of the biggest tournaments to happen in the FGC community down in Florida, was rocking and it was rolling. We had so many different competitions to speak of. Street Fighter 6, more in particular, shout out to Lashar to be able to step up, to be able to win that one. One of many different players actually playing for the Falcons rosters as well, as they believe they had about like 6 different people in attendance. But Super Smash Brothers was kicking and roaring because of course it was. We had 2 different bracket resets come through. More importantly, for Ultimate, we did have Michigan's #1 player, a Steve player, get the better of a Snake, the same Snake player that actually knocked him down to the lower bracket. He ended up beating him 3-0, 3-0 in a bracket reset. Hungrybox got the better of Wizrobe after getting a bracket reset on himself in a pretty devastating 3-0 loss. Hungrybox is right up top of the food chain. Puff is back, baby, you best believe. But that's not the only thing that ended up happening. If you know, you know. Dr. Doom was in attendance for the entirety of the tournament, and although it comes underneath some scrutiny and some controversy, make sure you keep your toilet paper at home. But if there's anything else that we missed along the way, as far as news is concerned, or what you were most excited for CEO, you let us know. Fatal Fury tournament was definitely a banger. But that's all we got as far as for the rest of that news is concerned. Now it's time to get a little nutty because we got to talk about some League of Legends.
We do, and well, I can't say how amazing this weekend was. We are finally moving towards MSI. We have all the teams, but let's start out with LTA North as we had a crazy weekend ahead of us. Cloud9 would end up defeating Shopify Rebellion to move to the Grand Finals. We had a rematch, and what a rematch it was. C9, FlyQuest, once again going at it, and it went the distance. All 5 games, but FlyQuest would come out supreme, once again taking a 3-2 victory over Cloud9 to secure their win and go to MSI. So let's take a look at it here. FlyQuest ended up going down after winning a pretty convincingly game 1, and then would require the macro play out of Inspired in his shot calling to really pull them back here. And this is it. This is the ending for it, and they would get back to this game number 5. Look how close it is, but it would be this shot call from Quad and then Whippo to go and know that they have enough to kill that tower, to take it down, while the rest of the team is sitting there from Cloud9 trying to get the Elder. They would backdoor to get their victory and move to MSI to make sure that they didn't get swept in the 4-1 from our Cloud9. This is amazing play from them once again, and it just goes to show kind of the level of the macro, because again, they did end up falling once again on kills and deaths. They were actually negative in the series compared to Cloud9. So we'll have to see how they decide to clean this up a little bit before going, because we will need them to make a step up before they go. Let's take a look at how the LTA North did play out for Cloud9 for FlyQuest to get to the end. And here we are. So again, as I said, in that lower finals, it was Cloud9 versus Shopify Rebellion. Cloud9 would end up with just completely obliterating Shopify in a 3-0 win there. They would once again move to try to get that salty reverse sweep and then win against FlyQuest. After losing game number 1, they would ultimately go to a game number 5 once again, where FlyQuest would just get the better of them in a very close series. So once again, FlyQuest are going to reign supreme. They will be the LTA North champion for the first LTA North, our second split for the spring. They will end up going to MSI, but remember, Cloud9 will also attend EWC as they did get the runner-up. Now, this wasn't all the action that was happening over the course of LTA. Remember, we do have LTA South. LTA is a region as a whole. We have LTA North, LTA South, so LTA South will be the second representative for LTA as we go forward into MSI. Let's go and take a look at how Furia decided to get their spot taken. They would end up going up against Pain, and well, you wouldn't think they would be winning this game, and they ended up winning it at the end. Again, another game where we end up seeing the team go down negative, but end up coming out positive at the end, and Furia had really good team fighting control over this. They came back after this Pain. They would end up utilizing a lot of the good comps here. We ended up seeing Furia IU on the Senna just completely pop off in this team fight. Senna did receive a couple of nerfs, not in this patch though that they're playing, so she's still doing a really good job. They're able to get the kills, move forward into game number 3. This game number 3 was just complete domination for Furia. Pain had no way to get back into this game. It kind of looked like they were lost at the end. The comp that we saw from them kind of looked a little bit safer, not really that they wanted to try to force it to game number 4. So Furia would end up just completely dominating Pain in this game number 3, locking their ticket to MSI as well and the championship for the LTA South. But remember, for Furia, they will have to go into the play-in side as that second seed for the LTA. So they'll be facing the likes such as BLG and G2, as well as some others. So they do have a rough road ahead of them. But as I said, not the only one. We did have LCK and LPL would finalize their brackets as well. Let's jump into the LPL first to see how BLG faced off against AL and who was the winner. AL though, coming from the upper end of the bracket, we have Tarzan, we have Flandre, we have Hope, we have Shanks. The whole team just looks so good, and this was probably one of the more convincing finals that we saw out of a region. And I have to say that anyone's legend, after playing over 60 games to get to MSI, look really good, and they absolutely know how they want to play their game. Remember, we are in Fearless now, and they have a really wide pool, and they've done a really good job. Hope coming out massive here as well for his team. And I just have to say, Tarzan finally reaching MSI when playing in the LPL. I believe that he's reached MSI when he was playing in the LCK. He's reached Worlds while playing with LNG, but he was never really able to make it to MSI while playing in the LPL. Well, that's finally over. He has finally made it, not running up in the second place anymore. Tarzan is gonna be so happy about this one. Was probably the MVP in my opinion for this one. Just complete domination of map control, doing such a good job on the objectives. Congratulations to anyone's legends for taking that first place. BLG will be second, representing LPL. But LCK, Gen G, let's go ahead and jump in to see if they can continue their domination streak versus HLE. That is not wrong on your scoreboard up there. HLE is up 2-0 in a best of 5 versus Gen G, a team who has been dominating the LCK after rounds 1 and 2 have started, aka their spring split going into MSI. Gen G would show though why they are probably regarded as the best team in the world right now. They would completely turn around a losing situation, go into a game number 3, and then turn the series on its head. They made it look like it was just starting the best of 5 coming into this. We have Zeka getting taken down, and then when you take a look at it, you can never count out the likes of Chovy. You can never count out the likes of the remaining of the team. Canyon, amazing job in this series. After that game number 2 into game number 3, completely dominated the jungle. They are going to take their ticket. Remember, there is no real champion crown, so they took the first one after this round 3 to get the first ticket for LCK, technically being their first seed if you take a look at the way it's rounded out. So HLE did have one last chance, so they would be dropped down, where they would end up facing T1 in round number 5 for the final spot at MSI. And well, T1 has had a bit of a rocky rounds 1 and 2, actually LCK Cup as well. So how would they fare against the first stand champions that are HLE? Well, this is where you can never count out T1. They came in looking like the T1 everyone expected them to be. Dorian, despite losing to Krugs and dying to Krugs against KT in round number 4, somehow he got the buff and went pretty much anime protagonist after that death, just completely coming out and destroying everyone. Look at this 2v1 here. Pretty much zones out the rest of Viper and Zeka to allow his team to get the kills. Then 2v1s, instead of getting a kill, the team will finish it off. And in dominating style here, look at them playing with their food. They are completely tower diving here. The Annie from Faker coming out. Tibbers just can do no wrong. He tanks the whole entire ultimate from the Lucian, then turns around and pushes him off while the rest of his team gets the kills. They are going to pick up that trophy. Faker holding the, well, I say trophy, but it's just a little bit of a ticket. They make their way to the MSI in Vancouver. And remember though, since they did win EWC last year, that means they are already slated to go. HLE will be taking that second spot, aka the third spot for Korea, to go to EWC. But right now we are locked in for all our representatives towards MSI. Let's go ahead and take a look at all of our qualified teams. In the LEC, we did have G2 versus Koi. Koi will be taking that first spot. LCK versus, or for the LCK, Gen.G will be taking the first seed, but as we did have the win from HLE in first stand, T1 will automatically get into the group stage as well. LPL, qualified teams, anyone Legend taking the first seed. BLG will have to go to the play-ins. LCP, CFO is the only team from first stand to requalify for MSI in an international event. They will have the first seed. And then for LTA, we have both FlyQuest and Furia to be our standing representatives for the LTA.
It's just insane. It's another major tournament that G2 will be a part of. Like, I'm just like sitting here thinking about it. I mean, like, obviously my heart is for T1 and I want to see Faker do it again. I love international tournaments. I think it's peak when it comes down to League of Legends. I know we can't have them all the time, but it does make it special, even for the split for the LTA. I know you're sitting there licking your lips. You're waiting to be able to see what FQ are going to be looking like going up against Hanwha and T1. So it's definitely going to be a good time. I want to make sure that your butts are seated throughout the upcoming weeks as Chris continues to give you the lowdown to get you prepared and utterly excited for MSI as that is happening in a few weeks' time. Same could be said for Champs or CDL. We'll be back here on the weekend's time and next Monday to get you all set up for that success. But let us know what we miss in the comments down below. Like, comment, and subscribe so that way you don't miss a single show here on the Global Gaming Network channel. Y'all stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.